Thinking about it. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Money Talk with Ben. Da-da!
Hello.
No, wait. Da-da! Ah, I did it wrong that time. Darn. Okay. So we are back this week with our financial expert. Basically, guys, if you're watching this video, you're inside our Facebook group, and we created this group so that we could share financial concepts with families. That's all we're trying to do here. I am a business coach by profession, so I talk to business owners all day long, and I'm constantly shocked at how little they know about budgeting, about retirement, etc. So I'm always going, you should talk to my husband about that. And finally, I got tired of saying it, and I said, let's create a channel.
I know. Well, the thing that you just posted earlier today about one of your clients asking you about percentage rates just almost knocked me on the floor. I'll be perfectly honest. I was like, I can't believe this person even asked that question, not as a bad thing, but like as
Right.
just educational, right? Like that they weren't.
Yeah, like your heart hurts for them, you know?
Exactly.
What Ben is referring to is earlier today, I had a client ask me, hey, I got an offer in the mail that says I can consolidate all my debts. Sounds like a great deal. They're willing to give me enough that I could take all my credit card and put it under one payment. That sounds really great to me. The only downside is it's 98% APR. And I was like, girl, that's not an opportunity. That is like
that's
extortion. That's criminal.
That's a scam. Like payday loan places are bad, and they usually, I think, are like 60 or 70%. And there's laws against them in certain areas that say you can't open up shop here because they're so criminal, right?
Yeah.
And so this.
So Ben, before we get into our topic for today, will you describe why 98% APR is such a terrible idea? Like, I mean, basically, that means you're doubling your debt every year.
Yeah, basically. or depending on how that percentage rate is defined, like the APR can be actually calculated. So usually it's done monthly or yearly, but sometimes it can be done monthly. Some places, if they're really scammy, they're done daily, right? Like you have to look at the fine print of how the percentage rate is actually being calculated, because they can calculate it of all these different weird ways to do it just to make more money off of you and kind of screw you over. But yeah, 98% is like basically saying if you started with like $10,000, but because you're obviously not going to pay the $10,000 off in a year. That's why you're trying to get this consolidated loan. So then at the next year, you're going to be at almost like 20,000 because maybe you paid off like $1,000 or something. So you're going to be at like 19,000 or whatever and change. I mean, you would assuredly, unless you came in with a windfall of money and upped how much you were paying, you would never get out of that debt. And they might even have a stipulation in there that you can't pay the loan off early.
Yeah. And you know what? Even if you are doing APR over annual APR, not monthly,
it's still terrible.
It's still terrible. I mean, you're basically at 98% APR. Yeah, you're basically doubling how much you owe every year, no matter how much you're paying off. It's still a terrible, terrible idea.
And that one, if that was your only option, like let's just say like just the hard numbers on it, if that was your only option of getting rid of that debt, the better option would be to file for bankruptcy. I mean, like just 100%. Like
well, she's not even behind on her debts. That's the thing. Right? Like she's still paying her credit cards. Yeah. She just liked the idea of the convenience of one payment instead of 5. And I'm going, girl, it's not worth it. Anyway, that wasn't supposed to be our topic for today. I'm sorry we got off topic, but I do think it's great that we have this channel now so we can share, opportunities for you to learn why something might be a good idea, so you can be on the lookout for yourself, for your friends, for your family, etc.
Right? And it was just too good of a thing to pass up. I feel bad taking that other person's pain from that, but it's a good learning opportunity just to teach people. So that's why I brought it up.
And she did the smart thing. She asked someone who would know before trying to figure it out herself. And that's another takeaway here is that's why we created this group. Drop your questions anytime. I mean, you're basically getting free coaching, which no one else gets unless they're in this group. So take advantage. Anyway, today we're supposed to be talking about diversification, Ben. So let's take it away. I think the first thing that you wanted me to do was talk about the definition. So I'm all about definitions for anyone who doesn't know me already.
Define your terms, right?
Yes, that's right. One of my favorite quotes, before you can discuss something with me or argue something with me, first you must define your terms. So if we're going to talk about diversification, let's define what diversify really means. So this is a dictionary definition. Diversify means, let's see what it says here. Oh, that's really helpful. Make or become more varied. Good. So what does varied mean? It
Okay.
means, in other words, you're going to allocate things in a way that reduces the exposure to any one particular asset or risk.
Right.
So as an example, if you had all your money in Apple stock, let's just say,
Yeah.
well, if that might be great some years, right? But if anything happened to Apple,
Right.
right, your money's going to disappear. Whereas if you had
Exactly.
your money invested in multiple different stocks across different industries, then even if one industry dives, the other money you had stashed away in other industries might still be going up, and so you're a lot more
Right.
safe from
Exactly.
different risks. So we want to take
Exactly.
a look at, anytime you go to invest in something, you want to take a look at what are the inherent risks in this industry or in this particular type of investment, and then make sure you split that money, put half there and half in somewhere that tends to have the opposite risk or
Right.
a completely different risks. Ben, can you give
Exactly.
some examples of diversification?
Yeah. So that was great that how you explained that too. So a lot of people first when they think about the stock market and diversifying their investments, they only think of the stock market and they think, oh, okay, well, I'm going to have some stocks in the oil industry and some stocks in technology and some stocks in medical field, and and then they think that they're diversified. And it's true that in the stock market you're more likely to be diversified doing that way. However, if we're looking at the greater portfolio of somebody's investments, we actually have other types of investments that are also just as important to do because, for example, the whole stock market could get a huge hit, which has happened many times over the years. Obviously, overall it goes up, but in those bad years, you want to have other things that are helping, mitigate against those losses, right?
Yeah,
So,
one, can I share one example, Ben?
absolutely,
Let's say that you retire tomorrow, right? And a year or two into your retirement, this, you've got all your money in stocks, let's just say, right? And in the year of your retirement, or maybe 2 years later, the stock market crashes. And you're going, okay, that's fine. It's going to come back up. But you've already retired, which
right,
means you don't have a choice. You have to pull money out, even though the stock market is
right,
down. Now, what's the
right.
rule we all know about the stock market? Buy low, sell high, right?
Yeah,
But if the stock market crashes and doesn't come back up for 3 years, then you just sold off in order to pay your bills and feed your family and feed
right.
yourself and drive
So
your
now you got to
car.
go back to work,
Yeah.
or
So now
yeah,
when it goes back up, well, you don't have as much as you
right,
would have because you had to spend that money. You don't have a
right,
choice. So you got to, like he says, you got to go back to work. You got to start a side hustle or something.
right.
And what if
Or
it does that multiple times? Like, sure, back in the day, maybe you would retire at 65, but guess what? What was it in the, I think it was by the 1970s, the life expectancy was only 62. So if
right,
you retired by
right.
65, you really were kind of on borrowed time. These days, people are living to their
I know.
80s. There's plenty
Yeah,
of, what are they called, Ben, when you live to
the
100? Thank you.
centenarians,
There's
I think.
plenty of centenarians out there. So if the stock market might crash multiple times during your retirement and you can't afford to have all your money there because you're going to end up
Right.
having to sell low
Well,
just to
or
eat.
you wanted to retire in a year that it did crash, right? Like
Right.
2008, great example, right? So there are millions of people that retire in any given year, right? If you happen to be that person that retired in a down year, now you either have less money for your retirement, like Sarah was talking about, or you're going back to work to make up for all of that money that you lost, right? So if only
Right.
having your money in one spot that's going to have huge amounts of exposure doesn't help you, later on if it does go down. So that's why we want to not just have diversification in the stock market, but diversification in our whole portfolio. So what do I mean by that? So a good allocation is if you had 20% in the stock market. So 1/5 of your investments are going to be in the stock market. Then you have 20% also in bonds, which are considered usually like safe. They're not going to make you a lot of money, but they're a safe place to store your assets. 20% in cash, like emergency fund. And that also includes your life insurance, which is both for you for health wise and also for investments, right? So you can have that as part of your cash because it also is an ability to pull out cash in certain instances. And then you have 20% in, most people will say gold, but we're talking like precious metals. Some people want to go off into like the cryptocurrency universe and say, well, that is kind of like a same hedge. And, I'm not going to get into the ins and outs of how you should take that specific sector, but gold typically is a good hedge against the stock market going down or inflation going up.
Can you define hedge? I want to make sure we're not using any words people
sure,
might not
sure.
understand
So it's
in this
basically
group, because
taking
this is not a bunch of experts.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's taking something and using it to kind of protect yourself against something else. That's really, right, I guess, in the simplest terms, right? So if the stock market,
like, for example,
go ahead.
The derivation of the word diversify comes from a Latin word that means make dissimilar. So you want to make your investments dissimilar from each other as much as possible. And one of the ways they can be dissimilar, and this is where the word hedge comes from, is they can be dissimilar in that when that thing goes down, the stock market tends to go up. Or when the stock market tends to go up, that thing tends to go down, right? So we want to invest in things that tend to do the opposite of what the rest of the market is doing.
Right, exactly. So we got the 20% in the gold or the gold, silver, or the whatever you want to call that category, precious metals, something like that. And then you have the last category, which is real estate. So your last 20% is real estate. And there's two ways that you can kind of do the real estate. You can either do it actually in physical real estate, by whether it's buying like homes or duplexes,
like buying rental properties.
Rental properties. There's also, I'm not going to give the term right now, but there's actually a way too that you can invest directly into businesses and companies that are buying those properties, so that you don't have to have the huge amount of cash that it takes necessarily to buy a property, but you can become a partial investor in those different properties that they're investing in. So that's another way to get the exposure of the real estate without having, a ton of money in your bank account to go and buy those properties. So doing this setup this way, you could have a year where 3 of those asset classes, 3 of those, let's say stocks and real estate and bonds all go down for whatever reason, but your gold and your cash, maybe your cash stayed level, or your life insurance policy went up slightly or stayed the same, and then your gold went way up or something. So no matter what, you've got some uptrend even when everything else is going down. So that's really what we're talking about when we're talking diversification. It's looking at that whole broad picture and how to get as much exposure to as many different areas as possible. Again, another one in gold could have been, some of it could be in art or in other things that tend to appreciate in value, right? Like those type of things.
Yeah, and I think the value of watching an episode like this, or the value of speaking to an actual financial advisor, is when you understand when you have the education aspect, right? And you understand things, when things show up in the mail, you can see, is that a good opportunity? Or like, wait a minute, Ben said this sounds wrong, right? Like, for example, there's like life insurance agents out there who will tell you to just give up all of your retirement savings and transfer it all over into this one life insurance policy, and that's actually a terrible idea, because sure, there are certain types of whole life insurance policies where you can stash money into them and they'll grow tax-free. They also have a floor, which means that they cannot lose money, they can only gain money, right? So if the stock market goes down and however the insurance company was investing your money, that stock goes down, they still won't lose money, right?
Yeah, you just won't make, you won't really make much, but you won't lose.
Yeah, you won't make much, but you won't lose anything. So that's all fine and dandy, but you still are not likely to earn as much in a conservative investment like that as you are in some other areas. Like Ben and I bought our home, what was it, 3 years ago? We sold it less than 2 years later and walked away with tens of thousands of dollars in cash. That's not really going to happen in your life insurance policy. You know what I mean?
It's not designed to. It's designed to be conservative so that you have something later on. That's what it's
exactly. So you want to diversify. And then, sure, on the other hand, when you're in retirement and the stock market has crashed, Where do you want to pull money out? Do you want to pull money out of your stock market to pay your bills that year? No. You want to pull money out of the cash value of your life insurance policy, because that's not going to lose any money, right? So in the bad years, you pull it out of there. In the good years, you pull it out of your stocks, right? And that's how you don't run out of money in retirement.
Right.
So diversification.
Yep.
Learn the lesson. Wear your seatbelt, kids.
It's a good lesson to learn. There's lots of good lessons out there, but that's definitely one of them that I like to see more people really taking the full advantage of the whole thing of diversification, and not just, totally. Oh, I've got, 5 different stocks that are in different areas. I think I'm pretty well set.
And again, that's not to invalidate that person. That person's doing the right thing. They just are only using a tiny fraction of the whole strategy. So speak to Ben if you have questions, guys. All right. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. Thank you, Ben, for being here. And Brianna, it's always lovely to see you, darling. Okay. Bye, guys.
Bye.